So this is the RS Pro IIT-1500 that I've been looking at for a little while. It's a fairly basic insulation tester with an ohms function for measuring low resistance, a voltage function which is automatic between AC and DC. It also has a low pass filter, and for the insulation ranges from 50 to 1000 volts does have the facility to measure the leakage current as well as the actual ohmic resistance. Again, the low ohms is actually operated via the test. It's not an automatic, so you need to test it. I wasn't expecting that one. When you test ohms, you have to put it over to there, don't you? Now that's ohms to 2 decimal places. It should be relatively consistent, although that's not on there properly. Good. There you go. So reasonably consistent. Let's go back to insulation, which was what I was going to do first time round. Set it for insulation test. Go down to 50 volts on this particular one. You have the polarisation index and DAR facility here. To get to them, you press and hold the lock until the little PI turns up, so it goes to polarisation index first. If you want to get to dielectric absorption ratio, press it again, short press, and it gets to that. And then you can click and hold test. We got it in this time. Must have been a dodgy clip connection. So we will let that run for 1 minute. 275 volts. And see the time going down. And if you want it with a little light on, I can turn that on. And that's what the display looks like with the light on. So it looks like with it off. Nice automatic feature. We'll let that go through to the 1 minute, and then we'll store the result and see what information I can get back. There we go. So once it's done its time test, defaults to the DAR value. So once you've saved it, you can then recall 2.63 megohms. That's number. It's got number 1 up there, so that's your first reading. Second reading was 4.28, and then you had a DAR of 1.6. So you can't get the voltage and the current. That's none. So yeah, so you can recall a little bit of the data that way, but it's quite limited. You can't get to the microamps once you've done a timed ratio test. So what we'll do now is we'll set it up to a Pi test, and we'll let it run through that, and we'll see what data it comes back with there. 1.7. So test is coming up to completion. Second, there we go. So it gives me the Pi ratio straight away, which we did was 7.1.
Oh boy, this is one of those bad days.
Okay, so it kicked off a polarisation index test at 250 volts, although it's showing 275 volts on the display there. It's showing it's in test. We've got the hazard warning light to say the voltage is being applied. It's slowly counting up, so we'll leave that for the 10-minute duration to see what results it comes back with. You can change to the actual time using the blue button and alternate between voltage and the time. It's recording it every second, so if I did want to record entering data manually, pen and paper wise, that time clock on there will be adequate for that, although the instrument itself doesn't save any of the interim data. It will only save the Pi test data, but I'm also curious to see if it will save the DAR data as well. So we'll let it run and then we'll reconvene towards the end of the test and go through with it, because the remaining 8 minutes will not make a good video. Okay, coming up to the end of the test, take 2. We will try and press the buttons in the right order this time, and that's the only problem with some of these instruments. If you don't press the store button straight away and you do something else, you actually end up wiping the data completely, and you have to repeat the test. And obviously if they're 10 minutes tests, that can be quite laborious if you get that wrong. The other thing is, although I kick this test off pretty much straight away, if you're doing this on an actual machine, you wouldn't want to do that. If you've done a timed IR test, you would then want to discharge the winding for at least the equivalent amount of time as you've been charging it before you repeat the next test. Some people will discharge it for up to 4 times the amount of time you had the test applied for, and so that's so you know there's no interference between the 2 tests. So you can see originally it came out as 7.1, it's come out as 10 now, and that's the reason why when you do this, that if you don't discharge between tests, you can affect the test result, and that's why it's come up with 10 apart from the 7.1 last time. But 10's quite high, so this time so he's gone to number 1, memory function 1. Yeah, so the memory cells are all allocated to a switch function. There's number 1 we just saved. If I go back to installation, so I've got some standard installation test results, microamps, so that tells me the voltage. So when I've just done a normal non-timed installation just on the control of the test button and the lock facility if necessary, I get the resistance reading at the end of it, the leakage current and the test voltage. I can go back to do each one of those. I can then, when I'm on the installation range, go to Pi and DAR. It defaults to Pi again, and I can go through resistance reading 1, resistance reading 2, and then the PI ratio. I go to DAR, and I can do the same. I can get resistance reading 1, resistance reading 2, and then the ratio. I can go between different results with these 2 buttons, but memory functionality is fairly basic, really. The other thing is you can't do anything with this data other than read it on the instrument. There is no ability to download it to a computer, so it's even less useful sometimes if you're doing a lot of tests. And if you can then download it to a PC, it saves a little bit of time, but if you did that, you'd store its result. You have to sit back down with it again at the desk and go through each result and manually write them down or type them into Excel or something like that. So a little bit limited in that aspect, really. Okay.